Ready for the 14-day challenge.
You guys don't look excited at all. My name is Tor Lowry. My mission is to make the game of pool easy for everybody. And I've traveled thousands of miles to help league and tournament players reach a level they've only dreamed of. And in some cases I have less than 2 hours to find and correct their problems, so I have to teach at high speed. But for those that have 14 days, I'm going to forever change how they view this game. I'm going to show them an easier way to play this great game of pool. So when we last left Brian, I had to find as many problem areas as possible in the time I had with him. Brian is a good shooter, but in order for him to get to that next level, he has to start monitoring his game. And one main reason people fail to improve their pool game is that they don't keep track of their misses or their missed position shots. When some players miss a shot during league or tournaments, they just write it off as being careless, but it could be a problem shot. And since many players play 8-ball, they may have several issues playing position and they don't even realize it, since they can misplay position and just shoot another ball. So a quick way to find problem areas is to do pattern play. Pattern play is where the player has to play a position for a specific ball. Usually, with most players, one single pattern of balls may highlight several issues. Here, I set up a pattern for Brian, and just within this pattern we found a few problem areas. For instance, he had to shoot the 2-ball and end up below the 3-ball line, but he had trouble hitting the side rail at the right spot. Another problem shot that came up in this pattern was shooting the 6-ball and getting shape on the 7-ball. A few more patterns, and before long we had discovered quite a few problem areas. And these are problems that will plague Brian's game forever unless he can put the time in and get rid of them.
He definitely pointed out some weaknesses in my game, a lot of shots that I need to work on and I will work on. I can only see my game improving from here.
Brian is a great example of a talented player who isn't that far from getting to a high level. Every problem area he removes will get him that much closer to becoming a pool monster. Next, I'm going to be in Arkansas to work with 3 new participants. But along the way, I made a detour in New Mexico to meet up with a legendary cue maker and pool player.
I was 4 or 5. I lived on a farm with my family up in Missouri, a little town, Lexington, Missouri. When I was 5, I think, for Christmas I got a little carom board. It was about this square. Had little green net pockets in 4 corners and had a kind of a checkerboard thing in the middle like you could play chess or checkers, and it had a bunch of red and green wooden hoops, about that big around, and came with a couple little wooden sticks like this that you could push them around and push them into the pockets. And it kind of caught my interest, so I spent a little time with that. And then I had an uncle who sold school buses in Kansas City. My uncle mentioned that they had an old pool table up in the attic, and I asked him about it, and he said, well, it's a small table. It's one of the fold-up leg things, and he says, "You're welcome to it if you want it." And I didn't take it, we didn't get it then, but I went home and I just couldn't forget about it and pestered my parents until I convinced my father to go up and get it. And we got it home, and it had metal legs that folded up, and it had a particle board instead of slate. But the rubber was still, it was real rubber, and it had 6 pockets, and it was a 3.5 by 7 about, and didn't have any felt on it. I had raggy felt. And of course I didn't have much money. I'm only a 6 or 7-year-old. And my mother suggested we put green corduroy on it, which is what we did. We ran the wales lengthwise, and I saved up my allowance from doing chores and working on the farm and bought a set of balls. They were 2 1/8, but they were pool balls. Cost $17 in those days. That was the world to me, $17. And it came with a couple cues and stuff, and so I started to play pool on it. And it rolled off like crazy at times, but I developed the basics there. And I went over across Dallas and bought my first cue was a Willie Hoppy. I paid $17.95 for it. And it had a leather wrap, which I eventually changed. I would just set up shots out of the book and practice them, and every shot that came up that I didn't understand, I would just practice until I did understand it, because I wanted to know why things happened. I think the greatest asset to becoming a pool player, at least, is curiosity. You just, something happens and you say, well, how did that happen? And, let's figure it out. And I think all good pool players have that in common, kind of. When I wasn't working, I'd work after school till they closed, usually 6, 7. I would go to the pool room. They had a pool room over on Haskell in Dallas. And there I met real pool hustlers. This was a real pool room. I mean, it had old arcade tables. It had the old style Coca-Cola machines with the water in it, and the little bitty Cokes. And it had a rack man, and it had some fairly good players, but I was soon the best player. And I wasn't very old. And from there, I would go downtown in Dallas to the Palace, which was upstairs, and I'd go back and play Charlie Clark. And Charlie was a great customer. I beat Charlie a little later on. I beat him out of my first $500 bill I ever won, and I also beat him out of the first $1,000 bill I ever won. And this, this is what, 59, 58, somewhere in there. I was still pretty young. About that time, the Cotton Palace opened. 44 bowling lanes, the 12 pool tables, and they weren't exactly 4.5 by 9s. They were some kind of off-brand and some kind of off-size. So they were a real home court advantage, but there were a bunch of good players in there. And I got to be the best player. And we had guys come through like Detroit Whitey, Fatty, of course. But we had a lot of good local players that played in the place too. Grady would come up from Houston, and I just drummed everybody in that place. I was virtually unbeatable in the Cotton Palace. Alfie Taylor, who was in the Air Force, I'm sure you've read his book. He wrote a book about pool and his life, kind of. It's a great read. He was in the Air Force, and he could play. He was Jack Taylor's brother, and he could play pretty good. He came in there on the lemon one night while he was still in the Air Force and asked for the 5 playing 9-ball. I used to give guys the 5 up routinely because I just didn't miss any balls, period. I just beat his brains out. He just couldn't believe it. I mean, I was playing a guy in there. I ran 12 racks on a guy once, giving him the 8 for $3 a game in the Cotton Palace with 100 people there, And it was great. We had, it was open 24 hours, and all the late night owls would come, you know, the thieves, the card sharks, the strippers. Jack Ruby would come and bring Chris Colt and a bunch of other strippers from his club downtown. He was a regular in there. And Titanic Thompson, who you've probably heard of, well, that was his home base. He lived catty corner. There was a Kips over here and a bunch of apartments catty corner from the Cotton Bowl over on Lemon Avenue, and Titanic lived over there. And I learned an awful lot about gambling propositions. Bumper pool players, we had the best bumper pool players in the world there. And they'd be playing 200, 300, 500, 1,000 a game every single night. And railbirds galore. When I'd get in there and play 1,000 a game 9-ball, betting my own money. And some of the guys I'm playing are laying off another 2,000 or 3,000 on the rail. I mean, it's just, it was unbelievable, phenomenal. Too good to last, unfortunately. And eventually, the feds came and busted it. Threw everybody in jail except me. I was the one, I was on the top of the list, but I just didn't happen to be in the pool room that night. They threw everybody in jail and hauled the pool tables off, put the pool players in these tractor trailer things, and hauled them down to jail. I went down to Houston to play and gamble. They sent for a friend of theirs by the name of Eddie Taylor, because there was action around Houston. Now, Eddie was a really good player, probably the best bank pool player, but he played everything good. But nobody, he wasn't a, you know, he wasn't like Wimpy or Crane, or he wasn't a well-known name. And Eddie came into town, and we took him around. He beat, well, he wins all the time. And then he asked me if I wanted to take a trip with him. So, I mean, that was an opportunity that I certainly didn't want to pass on. So we took off and traveled on the road together, just the two of us, for about 8 months, I guess. He used to play, and I was a good player. I was beating everybody playing pool. He would play me bank pool, one-handed to 2. I never won a game. Not one game. And, you know, I'm capable of running 6 or 7 banks. And he'd get up and bank 6, 8, 10. One day bank 14, one-handed. And Ronnie Allen was supposed to be the best one-handed, one-pocket player in the world at that time. Eddie and I were at the Stardust. They mashed up to play some one-handed, one-pocket in the air. You know, you could brush the cushion, but you couldn't lay the cue on the cushion. And I didn't know if Eddie had a good game or not, but I'm in with him because he's just the best player I ever saw. And I'm sitting there. They had 2 tables in the back room there where all the gambling took place at the Stardust in Vegas. And I'm sitting next to Squirrel, Marshall Carpenter. And I'm talking to him. I said, Marshall, I don't know if we got a good game here or not. You know, because Ronnie had such a strong reputation for playing one-handed. And Eddie's out in the middle of the table, and I'll never forget it. And he's got an end rail bank on the 8-ball. Cue ball's out in the middle of the table. And Marshall turned to me, he says, watch this, don't worry about a thing. Eddie's end rail banked the 8 and drew his cue ball for position and ran out. I mean, it was just, he was amazing. He would shoot shots that other people couldn't make. And he was smart. I know in Johnson City one year they had a, what was the proposition? It was a 4-rail bank proposition, I think, or a 5-rail bank proposition. And Jersey Red and just everybody, Boston Short, everybody was trying to make it, and nobody could make it for the money. I think it was Beanie's proposition. Eddie walked in and looked at it and came over and said, I can make that. I said, well, nobody's been able to. He says, watch this. He went over and opened the back door and stood around for a little while, and then finally went over to Beanie and says, Beanie, I'll take, I forget what the odds Beanie was given, it's like 3-1 or so. So I'll take $200 worth. And fired it in the first time. And the trick was, he opened the door. And the humidity shortened the table up, and he could make it. He had a proposition, it was one of the strongest propositions I've ever seen. You put a ball at the second diamond at the kitchen, and then you have to bank it. You have to bank that same ball. You keep putting it back. Bank that ball into every pocket. And that's a pretty good proposition. One rail on the side, 2 rails on the side, 3 rails in the corner. But he used to show me shots like, I don't know if I can do it now, maybe not on a diamond, but I can put the cue ball, within a few inches of a corner pocket and put an object ball at the second diamond and bank it back in that pocket. Wow. He could make that routinely, and I've even seen him go up further than the second diamond and make it. He could make banks that nobody else could. I've never seen anything quite like it. I traveled with Puckett. In fact, as my first wife was his niece. Puckett and I used to travel around quite a bit. First time he came to the Cotton Palace, he thought he'd get in there and stall with me and then beat me out of some money. I just robbed him. And he asked me if I'd take a road trip, and we left. He is amazing. I'll never forget this as long as I live. I couldn't have been more than 17. We get in his car, and it's night, and we're starting to go to California. And we drive maybe 30 miles, and he pulls the car over to the side of the road and says, Billy, he says, there's 2 ways to go to California, a northern route and a southern route. And truthfully, they weren't very much difference between them, but he says, I just think maybe we should be on the southern route. So we cut on a little highway, cut down and start on the southern route. And don't you know, we go about 40 miles and he stops the car again. He says, after thinking about it, I think we need to be on the northern route. So we get back up on the northern route, and we're driving for a little while. He pulls the car over to the side of the road. And I say, Utley, what's the problem? He says, now, Billy, he says, I know you're young, and I know you're a good player, but let me explain something to you. He says, in every partnership, somebody's got to be the boss. He says, now, you can be the boss if you want, and you can pick the places and tell us where to go and what to do and all that, or I can be the boss. I said, Puckett, I think I'll let you be the boss. And that was satisfied him. So we keep driving. Now I'm tired. We've been driving. It's midnight. And we're out in West Texas somewhere in some podunk little town. We're driving through town. It's about midnight. Puckett's older now. I mean, he's probably 60. And as we're driving through town, he sees this bar on the left-hand side of the street, and with a light on outside. And he pulls the car in and parks. Says, Billy, go in there and look and see if there's anything going on in there. I get out of the car, walk in. Sure enough, there's a bartender. There's one guy at the bar, and there's a 3.5 by 7 Valley bar table with nobody playing. So I walk in, look around, walk out, to go to the bathroom, walk out, and go get back in the car and tell Puckett exactly what I saw. And he says, let me go in and have a look. So he goes in and into the bar, and I get in the back seat and go to sleep. 2 o'clock, here comes Puckett. Says, come on, Billy, let's go. Gets in the car and starts driving off. We're looking for a motel. I said, Puckett, how'd you do in there? I said, I won $2,800. And everywhere we went, it was unbelievable. I mean, the guy was amazing. he could find money in the desert. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Every place we won, thousands. He'd put me in action, and then he'd go tell people he was the champion of Arkansas, and the next thing you know, he's playing $100 nine ball with some sucker. I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Not everyone could be a hustler. Not everybody would want to be a hustler. But for those who were interested in giving it a shot, I had Utley explain to me how it's done.
The first thing I do is just, I don't deceive anybody. I always tell everybody I'm the champion of Texas, or wherever the license plate's on my car.
If you came into a place like this, and you weren't known,
Right.
it wasn't, and there was, say, this many people,
Yeah.
early evening or late evening,
Right.
and you wanted a game, how do you go about getting a game?
Well, it's just, there's no set pattern, really. You have to do just what comes natural, you know, like things come up, like if I come in here and nobody knew me, the first thing I do is practice, just like we've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I play worse than you've been playing. And then I would try to get somebody to give me like the big spot,
A big spot now.
a handicap, whether
Handicap.
it's because I can't play anymore, right?
Right.
And when I used to could play, I wouldn't ask for a spot. Now I need a spot. There's 100 people around here can beat me, really, in Fort Worth.
Come on.
And that don't count in the state of Texas. Well, if I come in here, I just ask somebody if I was in a hurry, you know, and it didn't look too good. I'd say, does anybody want to play some nine ball for 20? I used to be the champion of Arkansas. I'll tell you before we play.
You look just that sincere.
And look at this, that's sincere. And then I'll practice, and I won't make no balls. And then I sit down and fall off the stool.
We're going to play this little game, right?
Yeah.
I'm the partner.
Okay.
We'll assume I put up something.
Yeah.
Just assume it.
Assume it, yeah. Okay.
And you're going to teach me the game.
Well,
And take my money.
oh, well, I mean, if you can, the way you play, naturally, I could beat you. So, I would play, and like, this is the game ball, right here. And we'd shoot, and you would shoot, and I'd shoot, and we'd miss, and you'd do this one would go, and then this one would go, and you'd miss, and this would go, and then this would be like this. I'd leave you like that. Try to, where you can't make it, and you get to shoot at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know you can't play, so I let you shoot at it, the game ball, a couple of times. Now, if you ever, when you missed it, you set it up accidentally like that, I would say, I am going to run out on you. Then I say, I'm the champion, and then I make it. Now that's, you make your opponent beat himself, in other words. You figure out how good he plays, and you play, and you, instead of trying to make the ball, you play safe. And you're doing this on purpose. You're leaving him. He's getting to shoot more than he ever shot before and lost, you know what I mean? But he's getting hard shots.
Deal. He'd walk in, tell him he was a champion of Arkansas, and lose like 50 games in a row for $1 a game. Now he said, "Now I'll be back tomorrow, and I'm going to play better." And he was one of the few pool hustlers. When he left the place, you heard that expression, "leave him laughing." That was his mantra. Nobody was angry that he had picked their pocket because he made them laugh so much. He was so funny. And he was the first one to really don costumes. You know, he had a Sinclair oil uniform that he would wear. And he had a Cadillac convertible. And he would drive right up to the front of the pool room, get out of his car in his Sinclair oil uniform, walk in, tell everybody that he was in the oil business and he owned a bunch of gas stations and stuff, and that he was the champion pool player of Arkansas. And then he'd lose 50 in a row. But before he left town, he had every quarter you could get. It was really amazing. Oh, I used to go to Beanie's all the time, you know, in Shirlington, Virginia. So one summer, I'm based in Chicago, I think. I've played around Chicago quite a bit, and there were some pretty good players there. Mexican Johnny was there. Bill and Cardona was there. Of course, Freddie was there. Then I went further east. I had a girlfriend in Northeast Maryland, so I traveled east, and I left her place. I was staying with her parents. They weren't real crazy about it, but that's the way it was. And I went down to the corner bar and started playing, and ran into a guy who played pretty good bar pool. And we played till 2 o'clock, and then he invited me to go up Wilmington, Delaware. He said there's a pool room up there that's open 24 hours. So I went up there, and I finally did beat him, and lo and behold, the minute I got done, another guy came over and asked to play. So I played him, and then before I finished, Mizrak showed up, and he was playing another guy, and I knew who he was, you know. When I got done with my guy, I think it was Atlantic City Herbie, a black guy, I had just beat him out of 1,000 playing one pocket. Miz came over and asked if I wanted to play some 9-ball, and I said, well, sure. I said, how much you want to bet? I think he said 100. I said, I'll play some for 300 or 400 a game, you know, because 100 would, for me, it was not much money in those days. And so we started playing. I think we played for 350s, the most we played. We broke even after about 10 or 12 hours, you know, so that was a pretty long night for me, you know. But I traveled all around, up around Boston, New York City. In New York's one of the places I got beat. I was playing at Park Row Billiards. I doubt if it's there, but it was an interesting pool room. You had to take a big kind of freight elevator from the ground level down, I don't know how far, maybe 2 stories or something. And the pool room was down there. And they had, up on the street level, the only place I've ever seen this, they had like a storefront with bars on it, and behind the storefront they had a TV set. And on the main gambling table down there, they had a video camera. This was long ago, way before its time. They had a video camera, so you could drive up in your car and you could look at the camera, I mean at the screen, to see if there was any action down there. If there was, you'd go put your car in a parking lot and go down there. Anyway, I was down there, and they sent for Toby. His name was Toby Sweet. I don't know if you know Toby or not. Well, I'm from the South, or learned to play pool in the South, where we try to hit the ball. When you go back east, everybody plays push-out. So he wouldn't play unless we played push-out. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but he probably is the best 2-shot shootout player who has ever lived. And he's got me, I think, 8 games stuck at 50 a game. Now, I haven't had anybody beat me in forever. And I could see why I was losing. Every time he got out of line, he would push out, and he'd push out to a position where he could play safe rather than take a tough shot, you know. Well, I didn't know how to do that. Finally, at 8 games loser, I just couldn't stand it anymore. So next time it came up, he pushed out, and you could push out behind a push out in those days. It wasn't, you know, 2 fouls and ball, there was, you know, ball in hand. If you pushed out, I could push out. You could push out, I could push out. So I just pushed the cue ball over to the middle of the table for an end rail bank, which I was a pretty good banker. He said, shoot. I banked it in and ran out. Next game, did the same thing. Made another end rail bank, ran out. 3 games in a row I did that, he quit. I had no chance to get even. He said, come on, I'll play some more over at 7-Eleven, which was his home court. Turns out Toby was, I think he's the best player I ever played. He played so clean, so perfect. I mean, he was always in line, didn't miss any balls. If he got out of line, he played the best push out you ever saw in your life. The guy could really, really play. Years later, when I was making cues, he came through Baltimore where I'd started, and I sent him on down to Beanie's, and then he went on down to Atlanta, and he called me up one night, and he wanted to see maybe if he had a good game. He said, you know, last night I won 2,800 playing this local guy, giving him the 8-9. I said, well, who are you playing? He says, well, the guy, he says his name is Billy Johnson. Now, Billy was a good player. Until we gave him the 8-9, just robbed him. He was the nicest guy to go to dinner with. The minute he got up to play pool, looking in his eyes was like looking at a shark. He was relentless. It was unbelievable. And he took a lot of shit too. You know, when he was out working for Brunswick, promoting the Gold Crowns and the bowling alleys and all that. I've watched him play 2 separate times where he was just taking so much shit. It was unbelievable. He was in Dallas, he was playing in a bowling alley in an exhibition with Ernie Gomez, who was a kind of a fat Mexican guy that we all loved. I mean, he was funnier than hell. And he was really riding Mosconi, and he had Mosconi, I can't remember the exact score, but it was something like 33 to -2 or something like that. And Ernie, he was light on his feet, could dance and all that, and he was just cabareting in front of all his friends and everything. And he finally, I think he went a little too far. He barked at Mosconi and says, when are you going to run out, Mosconi? Willie jumped out of his chair when he got a shot and said, right now. And he meant it. And he ran dead out like there was nothing to it. And then I watched him at an exhibition in Baltimore. They had the TV cameras, and it was for charity or something. And he was playing a stripper, a famous stripper from Baltimore named Blaze Starr. Every time he was getting ready to shoot a tough shot or something, she'd bend over and stick her right in line with the pocket or everything. He ran like 140, like there was nothing to it. He was amazing. I've only seen him play a few times, and I've been out with him a couple times. He center balled things so good. He showed me, he had a, and you'd probably appreciate it, he had a cinch shot for those, you know, those real tough straight ends, you know, and you're hanging in the pocket and the 10 balls or the 9 balls up there, and just one of those muscle shots that you just gotta suck it up and make. And he had a special little stroke, and I hadn't thought about it in years, but I was watching Hopkins play some straight pool, and when Wimpy showed it to me, I didn't give it much thought, but in essence it's kind of the stroke that Hopkins uses, if you've ever seen him play. And Willie told me, you know, move your hand up on the cue.
Oh, Lassiter told you that.
Yeah. And it was like a little short stroke, you know, to negate any kind of sideways movement or anything, or hitting the cue ball, you know, off center. I mean, he speared the toughest shots in better than anybody. That's why he was so tough to beat. My feeling is the better players can find center ball better than the non-better players.
Yeah.
And it seems to be, I don't know, it seems to be a gift. It seems to be the one thing that separates the really good players from everybody else. The ability to find that center ball. It's not so easy. And then it just dawned on me one day that I'm just not going to be able to make a living playing pool. So I decided I needed a job. I guess most pool players have to make that decision sooner or later. I ran into Danny James, my ex-partner in the cue business, in Maryland on one of my road trips out there. we just kind of hit it off. We beat a bunch of people around Baltimore, and we took a couple trips down into the Carolinas and beat some people down there. And on our trips, we kind of discussed the cue situation because we both were interested in cues, and there weren't very many cues available. It took forever to get a cue from George Balabushka, and we didn't like Ernie's cues and the way they played, and there really wasn't anybody else. Viking was in the cue business, and Mucci was working up in Chicago for Dick Helmstetter at National Tournament Chalk. I called Danny up and I said, let's try the cue business thing. So I drove out there with all my stuff, rented what was a old clam house or something, kind of a garage type building, and started it there. And we, the first cue we made wasn't really saleable, but the second one was. We sold it for $90 and $15 an extra shaft. Danny and I made 5 cues, took them to Johnson City, sold them all the first day. Mike Siegel and Larry Hubbard, who were 2 really good road agents, came by. We made them each a cue, and they kind of were like Johnny Appleseeds. Danny and I used to laugh while we're working, because you could tell where Mike and Larry were by the people who called to order cues, because they just beat everybody wherever they went. And we used to laugh about it, saying we could just take pins and put them on a map and follow their trip, because every time they left town, people called up to order a cue. It just went on and on and on. And at one point, we had virtually every good player in the world playing with one of our cues, one of the Joss cues. Wimpy had one, Fatty had one, Mizrak had one. Everybody had them. Around 2012, I decided that I'd made enough money that I just didn't need to make cues anymore, and I thought it might be fun for me to get back to playing pool again. I was blind as a bat at that time. I couldn't see to make cues anymore. My eyes had gotten so bad. People don't realize what a strain all that fine detail work is on your eyes. And it wasn't until I bought the place down in Arizona that I realized that they could attempt to fix my eyes. And so, what was it, last year or year before, I had one eye fixed. I played all year down there in Phoenix with one eye, basically, but I played pretty good. When I started, I quit for 20 or 30 years, I guess, and when I came back to the game, things had changed a lot. They'd gone from the Centennial balls to the Aramuth balls, which play entirely different. They'd gone from, at least the people I gamble with, had gone from, 4 and 5/8 inch pockets on gold crowns to 4-inch pockets on diamond tables. And it was like swimming in a different ocean. And I'm still struggling with the way the diamond tables play. They're not very forgiving. I've just, had to take my pool game apart and try and redo it, and truthfully, your videos have been a big help.
Oh, well, I appreciate that.
Oh, you just have no idea. I tell everybody, there's a lot of information in there that you're just not going to learn anywhere else. And that's the truth. And I'm not saying that because
well, I appreciate that.
You're sitting here. I'm saying it because I believe it. And I'm a big promoter. And traveling with Taylor, Eddie Taylor, the way he taught me to bank, and is the way I bank basically, is in the vertical center of the cue ball. And use speed to basically control the angles, and you play with I call it an inert cue ball. Now, I don't know if people understand that, but kind of a scooting, dead cue ball, you know, because it's more predictable. A lot of those trick banks that come up playing one pocket where the object ball is in between the two pockets and very close to the rail, you know, with that sliding cue ball, that inert cue ball, they're really hangers. I mean, it's pretty hard to miss one if you know where to hit it, and the speed and the stroke to use on it. And a lot of banks are just easier with that inert cue ball. But then when I got your video and I started looking at, you know, I had just been guessing all those years, and started to look at the numbers and see where I really had a point of aim on the rail. Well, it just changed everything. Was it last year? Not this year. Last year I played down at Colby's in Phoenix and played Scott and other good players, and my percentage of end-rail banks was phenomenal. I put it up there with anybody, but I used your system because it's the same system you kick with, basically, on the end-rail banks. You know, it seems like you don't have to impart any English on the object ball because the distance has enough time for the object ball to follow the correct path. So, you know, that's what I do nowadays. I play in some tournaments, practice, try and improve my game.
14 Days would like to thank Bill for everything he has given to the game of pool. He's a great guy and a true legend of the game.
My name's Tony. I'm originally from Salem, Arkansas. I just recently moved to Central Arkansas. I started playing pool when I was a child. I played until probably I was 24. I got married. I quit playing. I recently started playing about 3 years ago. I haven't reached the level I used to play at. One of my goals is to get back to where I used to be and exceed that.
My name is Butch Jett. I live in Conway, Arkansas. Been playing pool off and on for about 20 years. I got started while I was in the Marine Corps. My game, my weakness is my power play. I'd like to, as far as my goals, win the Arkansas State Championship in the Masters in the A Division, and also win a national championship in the BCA. I've been playing in that for off and on for 15, 16 years.
Hi, my name is Justin, and I'm an amateur pool player. This is kind of the only hobby that I have at the moment. It's really the only one I foresee for the future. I'm a pretty average player. I mean, I try to play as much as I can. I probably have more knowledge than I can, you know, as far as execution, which is really my big problem. And I think a lot of my execution stems from the fact that I see double all the time. And so I have a vision problem that forces me to shoot with one eye closed just to get down to one image. And even as I stare at the camera now, I actually see two of them. So I usually have to kind of cock my head to one side, and it kind of helps correct the vision. But that probably, you know, causes a big loss in confidence for me. And so I mean, there will be days where I shoot really good, everything feels really good, much like other people do. But some days when it doesn't feel right, it feels really bad. And I struggle to make 2 balls in a row. And then some days, you know, I'll run out of rack here and there. Not often, but, you know, sometimes. So I'm just looking for a helping hand, and that's what I'm looking